Good afternoon, everyone. Seem to have lost a few people. That's the effect that healthcare has on you. Who in the audience is in healthcare, has worked in healthcare, is a healthcare professional of some sort? I know there's one there, at least one, two in fact. Any other healthcare savvy people? Okay, you can leave now if you want. You're not going to learn anything new, I don't think, being healthcare professionals. But you might be able to help me answer some of the questions at the end. Okay, healthcare, more specifically looking at health tech, and more specifically looking at how it's majorly disrupting, majorly changing and transforming healthcare as we know it now. And so I wanted to give you a little snapshot of why I believe that, why many investors around the world believe that. To give you an idea, it is likely that venture capital investment in health tech this year will be far higher than it was last year. And last year doubled the previous year, to give you a flavour. So it's growing fast in popularity. So, this is me, very quickly, very short snapshot. On the right-hand side is my full-time job, which is Propel Group, which is a seed stage, early stage investor in health tech. We invest anywhere around the world, but we look at technologies and solutions and business models that will improve healthcare in Asia. On your left-hand side, is Scale and Growth Asia, which is a recently formed advocacy group focused on health tech. And the intent there is to ensure that there is a greater dialogue between the key stakeholders in Asia as it relates to health tech. So that means investors, corporates, startups, governments, clinicians, and media. And that's my part-time job. I do whenever I can, but we're doing quite a lot of interesting events to promote the value of health tech going forward. So healthcare is changing dramatically, and I think most physicians understand that, whether they like it or not. But it certainly is disrupting, the whole of the healthcare sector, and importantly, it is only impacting every single stakeholder, every single company, and the whole value chain of healthcare, from R&D to manufacturing, all the way through to the way in which patients are being managed. And we'll look at some of those things very quickly. It's being driven by technology, and I don't mean just a telephone in your hand. I'm talking about a whole raft of new technologies, such as, for example, genomics, which are creating some very important and wonderful insights as to how the human body works and why certain diseases happen, or why certain of us are contracting certain diseases, such as, for example, cancer. It also means some fantastic new opportunities are opening up for not only the existing players in the industry, but also a number of new players in the industry. So we're all familiar with Apple and Google moving into healthcare, but there's a number of other players doing that as well. Why it's exciting for me and why it should be exciting to all of you sitting in Asia, it is a unique opportunity for a lot of the developing markets in Asia to substantially improve, or as it says on the slide, leapfrog their current healthcare infrastructure by leveraging technology to deliver a better healthcare standard at a cheaper price to each member of their population. And I think from a Singapore perspective, it's an opportunity to be a leader in innovation in healthcare. It has all of the building blocks required to achieve that. So let's dive in a little bit. Obama recently is on record as talking about precision medicine being one of the most unique opportunities that medicine's ever seen. I guess it's medicine 2.0, if you would like to sort of frame it somewhere. Looking at some of the tech drivers that I believe are contributing to this change, data is one, and we'll look at that very quickly. Another is biosensors. Most of you have heard the term wearables. But biosensors is really the term to look at, simply because I'm looking at the sensors inside those wearables and other types of technology that are helping convert a biosignal into a data signal. 3D printing, it's not just an experimental laboratory anymore. We're starting to see that appear and arrive within the value chain of health, and I'll look at that. And finally, proven innovation, which is quite an important topic, but a topic that says, how do you ensure that technology is available, can be used in some of the low-income economies and the rural areas around Asia. Okay, so let's looking at data. I've just picked 6 separate particular buckets there, ones that you may have heard of. Genomics is the first one. It is fundamentally rewriting the way in which we are looking at drug research and redevelopment. It is fundamentally rewriting the way in which we are prescribing medicines, and it is fundamentally rewriting the way in which we are diagnosing now and in the future, the way people are contracting diseases. So we're starting to see some really interesting new business models shaping there. We're starting to see some significant investments from big pharmaceuticals, for example. One example out there is 23andMe. Most of you probably would have heard of 23andMe, largely for the wrong reasons. They ended up being told by the FDA for a while to stop trading, simply because they hadn't had approval to take their product to market. That's all been solved now. They're back in the market, and they have struck a number of very large deals with companies like Roche, for example, the large Swiss multinational pharmaceutical company. Data analytics is the other one. Of course, there is an enormous growth in medical data around the world. In fact, IBM claims that it has doubled in the last 2 years and will continue to double year on year. So it's probably the, what they call the E-room laws, the reverse of Moore's law of growth in terms of data. But all that data needs to be analyzed for it to make sense. There is a wealth of data out there. And Flatiron, for example, Health is focusing on oncology, where they're looking at all of the data of patients who have got cancer and are taking a particular medicine in order to help them manage their disease better. And IBM Watson is doing a lot of work with established players such as J&J and Medtronic, etc., looking at the data with a view to helping better medical research. A lot of medical research is in individual documents that are very hard to sort of link together to end up improving and certainly advancing health. So that's a little peek there. Supporting providers, in other words, how do you help clinicians get data, get better access to insights to patients? There are a number of players out there, but the one that's more famous, or most famous, is certainly Apple with HealthKit. And more recently, they brought out CareKit. You will find in the US that most teaching hospitals have already launched their own version of those products, because they're open code, open source, and are using them heavily to help gather data on the way patients are managing diseases such as epilepsy or other types of chronic diseases. So that's the most famous one there. Public awareness is one worth knowing. There are various ways of looking at it, but I'll just give you one example. In countries like Cambodia, for example, some 50% or so of anti-malaria products are counterfeit. So a lot of people have been poisoned, some people have been killed. There is a little outfit called Sproxil that allows a patient receiving medication to, via SMS, check that the packet that they've got in their hand is bona fide medicine that's been manufactured by who it says on the box, because counterfeiters are pretty smart in terms of copying the boxes of the large pharmaceutical companies. So you can see that's very simple technology, but it's saving lives. Digital therapeutics, that is a huge growth area for not only individuals such as you and I who may have a chronic disease and are looking to manage that disease more effectively, but also by big pharmaceutical companies, for example, who are looking to ensure that the fact that you have a pill prescribed to you, you're also able to manage your disease better and therefore get more benefit from your pill. So there's a couple of examples there. Omada Health is the one that's probably better known, as they recently, about 6 months ago, got a blessing, let's say, from the WHO for making a positive impact on diabetes. Finally, the health ecosystem, that really is talking about how do you aggregate all that information into one place. The better known player there was Veridic, but Apple is now moving into this space to try and contribute as well, as everyone is starting to recognize the sheer value of health data, not only in improving health, but also in, for example, selling insurance and other types of products. So that is the data angle, and that's why in the snapshot, in 6 key areas, I believe that medicine, science, research, the way in which we treat people is going to fundamentally change, and it's happening now, it's not something in the future. A very quick look at biosensing wearables, to use both words to give you a flavor. Most of us are familiar with the Fitbit or the Misfit. Jawbone just announced recently they were getting out of that business, although it's rumored that they're actually focusing on clinical data now and clinical devices rather than consumer devices. But of course we're now familiar with things such as the Apple Watch, the Garmin watch, for example, that are getting a little smarter in terms of giving you heart rate data, as well as steps, activity, sleep, and so on and so forth. We're starting to see those sensors appear in clothing, Athos is the better known one for consumers, but if you look at all professional top league teams these days, be it professional football in the US or professional football in Europe, all those teams are wearing biosensors whilst they train and whilst they play. Tacticians of those teams and medical doctors of those teams are using that data to manage a team minute by minute, and therefore, for example, pull a player because his performance is indicating that he's about to get injured. Pull a player before they're injured, their recovery will be quicker. We're starting to see that also in NFL, for example, where they're using sensors on helmets to limit concussion damage and so on and so forth. Patches and tattoos, I'll skip that one for the moment and talk about ingestibles and implants. We're starting to see sensors being ingested and being approved for ingestion by the FDA, where a patient is ingesting the sensor at the same time they take their medication. Extremely useful for two things: clinical trials, in terms of understanding how a patient is reacting to the medicine they're taking, particularly if that medicine is new, and also compliance. Most patients that prescribe a medicine, particularly if you say for cardiovascular, start feeling better within 2 or 3 months of taking the medicine and start giving up taking the medicine. And so those kind of pieces of information are useful to try and help the physician work with their patient to improve the patient's health. So again, not only, as the slide before talked to you about what we're doing with data at a more macro level, this is probably what I would describe as little data. In other words, are the things that you and I will either be wearing because we've bought them already. I suspect many of you have already got some sort of smart device on your wrist. But going forward, you'll see an increasing number of these things appearing, either because you voluntarily bought them or because you've come out of hospital as an outpatient and you've been given one of these devices to help you stay out of hospital rather than coming back in. So what does that mean? That means the ecosystem as a whole is evolving around really 4 key poles, and those are healthcare coordination, payment, personalized medicine, and patient empowerment. I won't go through this slide in detail since I don't have the time. 20 minutes is always a challenge to give you a real understanding of what's happening in healthcare and why it's changing. But that slide hopefully gives you a flavor of how, one, those things are all contributing to that big data cloud in the middle, and that information, as it enriches and gets broader in volume, is allowing us, the research world, for example, to start deriving much better insights into how a disease works, why you get a disease, and how to solve those diseases. But also we're starting to move in areas such as, for example, personalized medicine, the various things I showed you on the previous slide, ranging all the way to the other end, where we're looking at, of course, electronic medical records, case management. Some hospitals in the US are using the data analytics I was talking to you about to be able to much better manage the patients that are leaving the hospital. Hospitals in the US get very heavily fined if a patient returns back into that hospital because they're having a relapse. And so they're using that data to risk categorize patients and to be able to manage that patient once they're outside the hospitals with their outbound teams. So very powerful stuff that is helping us all improve, but also hopefully trying to reduce the total cost healthcare represents to the government. Okay, looking at 3D printing. Most people, I think of 3D printing as that little thing in the corner, that black box that prints things in plastic. 3D printing, certainly in the medical space, has gone way beyond that. Dentistry is the medical vertical that's adopted it the most. In fact, most of those clear bridges that a lot of people wear, transparent plastic or resin type clear bridges that are heavily worn in the US, for example, are made by 3D printers. Some 17 million have been manufactured through 3D printing alone. We're seeing in other things in terms of starting to make replacement teeth and various other things that are done on a bespoke basis. In other words, are done to your measurement rather than the approximate size that is produced normally by a manufacturer. Medication, if you think that 3D printing is not affecting the way medicines are being made, then think again. The FDA recently approved a medicine that is 3D printed, and now we're getting into the territory of medicine shape being important to the way in which the active ingredient is being absorbed by the human body. And so 3D printers are enabling very fancy and fancy shapes to medicine, conical and various other shapes, which are apparently enabling us to absorb the drug better and then potentially have to take less drug to achieve the same outcome. On the left-hand side, just to give you a flavor, we're also seeing 3D printing appearing in low-income economies as well as areas where people cannot afford healthcare. where, for example, we're printing prosthetics, or even, in this particular case, a 3D printing stethoscope, which costs $5 and works the same way as a $200 piece you probably bought in the shop when you started your career as a doctor. Okay, frugal innovation, very quickly touching on that, but that is where we're starting to see the convergence of technology with certain aspects of diagnostics, for example. The only one I'll talk about here for time reasons is the one at the bottom. A little company, Israel, is manufacturing using a mobile phone. In this particular case, it's an iPhone, but it includes a Samsung as well if you want to. Literally a cervical cancer screening system. So on the phone, and the device that goes onto it, a physician or a trained nurse can actually carry out a cervical cancer screening. The gold standard in the hospitals to do the same thing is about $10,000 to $15,000. So it's a substantial difference in price. And so vast swathes of ladies in low-income economies, rural areas, developing economies are able to start receiving the right level of diagnostic because of this particular product. The challenge it has at the moment, of course, is how you actually get into the hands of the right people to deliver the diagnostic. But that's the next challenge. Technology has achieved it. And so, some 10% of the cost of buying the real machine. Okay. Just quickly looking at business models. I love this quote because it's from the industry and it states the fact that everybody recognizes the fact that the healthcare business model is broken and we need to rethink it. A few of the key changes worth looking at. I talked about pharmacogenomics in generic terms, but essentially that is the fact that having a better understanding of the computer code that runs our bodies, in other words, the genomic sequence of our bodies, we're able to start understanding what triggers what in terms of certain diseases. A couple of examples up there are the NHS, for example, getting into a deal with large pharmaceutical companies looking at rare cancers and seeing how we can leverage that data to develop solutions. In other words, what's the aberrant protein in that DNA, and therefore how do we potentially find a solution to address that protein? 23andMe is doing the same thing in the US with Pfizer and Roche. Recently reported, it was Amgen who discovered one of the key genes that you find in individuals with a lower propensity of cardiovascular disease. So now we understand that particular gene is prevalent in people with lower cardiovascular disease. What does that mean in terms of rectifying the gene or gene sequence in the human body of the individual that doesn't have it? So that's the research that Amgen is going in now. Clinical data. Clinical trials are an expensive process. Most of the cost of a new drug is the clinical trial, particularly the phase 3 of a clinical trial. In other words, a controlled trial where 10,000 patients are taking a medication. And throughout that process, it can take many weeks, months, you monitor each patient to understand how they're reacting to the drug and whether they're getting the benefit. And not every patient gets that drug, for those of you who listen to the clinical trial. In other words, we'll do a comparison. It's a limited number, and it therefore means that the rest of the world is getting a medication based on the data from 10,000 people. It has benefits, but it also has a lot of drawbacks. Some of the technology I showed you on the first slide, such as healthcare, for example, that Apple has launched, and many other technologies are allowing a far greater number of people to continue registering, recording, and reporting their data as they are taking a specific medication. So post-launch, once you've prescribed that particular medication, for example, Lipitor, which is a cardiovascular product, you can start registering a lot more data. So you're now going from n equals 10,000 people to n equals millions. It is statistically much more relevant in terms of how you manage disease and how a particular product is improving the disease of that particular patient. It also helps to understand what percentage of patients are not actually reacting to a product. Not every drug has the same effect on every individual. If you're the wrong genotype for a particular product, you will derive no benefit whatsoever from it. So that costs an awful lot of money to governments that reimburse these drugs, particularly if you're not getting any benefit at the patient level. Okay. Just want to leave it out because we're in Singapore. We should talk about Singapore a little bit, and we should talk about business models. Singapore has, as you know, announced its smart nation, smart city, smart health. And Singapore is really addressing the same challenges that every single mature economy has. And that is simple, that the level of chronic disease for the population is growing substantially. Some 70% of Australians have at least one chronic disease. The population of those countries is getting older and older, which means that we need to find a way of managing all these people as they get older. But the converse of that is that there are fewer people in the workforce, which means that we're raising fewer taxes, and therefore we can find it harder and harder to pay the healthcare bill. So, what Singapore's trying to do is to work out how technology will enable them to deliver the same standard of care to all its population, but at the same price point, if not a lower price point. Technology comes into play. One of the things they're looking at, and I won't go through all of those, is the hospital question. Hospitals have a problem, which is that everybody goes to them when there's a specialty problem, and then they get managed by the hospital. And so as a result, they get completely overrun by volume. And so when you sit in the NHS, for example, and your patients are complaining about a 3-hour wait, the reason for it is because this input is far larger than the system can actually handle. But probably, when you talk to the triage people in the NHS hospital, they'll tell you that a large proportion of the people in the queue shouldn't even be in the queue. They're there because their doctor's not there, or because they don't know where to go, or they panic, or it's other things. And so, what the Singapore government's trying to do is what's happening in the UK and the US is how do you reduce the number of people coming into the hospital, and how do you reduce the number of people who have left the hospital coming back into the hospital, so that the resources of the hospital are only focusing on the new cases, or the cases that really do need hands-on medical support. So the little diagram on the right-hand side of the slide, this one here, is trying to give you a sense of the fact that over the last few decades, we've moved from a decentralized cottage industry as a healthcare provider to a very centralized model. Everyone goes to the hospital for specialist care, to a model that's going to go the other way. Because technology is enabling us to do much more remote monitoring, much more easily vitals data gathering. And so the midway point is that a lot of the infrastructure will move more towards clinics, for example, rather than the hospital being the center point. And eventually, over time, hopefully a lot of care will be, or certainly a lot of monitoring and some of the easy primary care will be delivered at home. The Chinese government is betting heavily on this because if you've ever been to a Chinese hospital, you can guarantee a 7-hour queue pretty much to see one specialist, and you'll see that specialist for 3 minutes after your 7-hour wait. Largely because everyone goes to the hospital, they ignore the clinics, and so the Chinese government is placing a huge bet on this particular model going forward. Okay, so this should give you a flavour and a summary slide around. It talks about IoT, and largely because what I'm trying to get a flavour connected to is this whole Internet of Things. In other words, all of these devices, data generation points are all coming into one in terms of delivering a different healthcare mechanism as a whole. And hopefully you got a sense from my conversation that R&D is changing radically. In other words, we'll be looking at different ways to solve diseases. It won't necessarily just be giving you a drug. Manufacturing is changing with the 3D printing, for example, that I shared with you. But if we can 3D print drugs, do we really need to move boxes around the world, or can we just prescribe a drug, go to the pharmacy, and they print it for you there? Radical difference to supply. And then, of course, other pieces that I shared with you in relation to the way in which healthcare is delivered at home, at the office, etc., etc. But literally trying to give you a flavour of just how different things are going to be and how that's already starting in our everyday lives now. So finally, just to summarise, healthcare is changing dramatically. It's not changing in the next decade, it is changing now dramatically. There is a major move towards the patient, you and I, being empowered, which means a greater accountability on us, on our healthcare. And as a result of all the technology, we're starting to see the business model that is healthcare as we know it now radically changing in the way in which it's going to deliver healthcare to us in the future. It's also, in my view, allowing Asia, particularly the neighbouring markets around Singapore, to deliver a standard of care to its population that we have all had the privilege of enjoying through our lives. So it's very exciting as far as I'm concerned. That's it. Thank you very much. Any questions?